and welcome to KIKAO, your weekly focus on Africa's agriculture. My name is Joe Agayo. This week, we answer that big question. Is there a connection between global pandemics and conflicts in distant lands on the one hand, and the prices of food in the store or market near you? Let's now join Dr. Canisius Kanangire, the Executive Director of AATF, as he engages his panel on our topic for the week.
The prices of basic commodity across Africa and the world have skyrocketed in recent times. There have been many theories seeking to explain these trends, ranging from political events to global happenings, such as COVID-19 pandemic, the Ukraine-Russia conflict, and drought. In this episode of KIKAO, we will highlight these recent trends, their drivers, and the impact they are likely to have on food production, trade, and access in Africa. We will particularly focus on understanding how these global crises that are unfolding thousands of miles away are impacting rural villages on the African continent. Further, we will examine some actions that can be undertaken to deal with the challenge in both the short and long run. I'm Dr. Canisius Kanangire, the Executive Director, AATF, and on the program this week, I'm hosting Ambassador Carla Mukavi, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, FAO, Kenya Country Representative, and Dr. Joy Kiru from the Department of Economics, the University of Nairobi, Kenya. You are welcome.
Thank you.
What would you say are the challenges people are facing on the African continent with the current rise of prices of basic commodities like food and fuel?
First and foremost, of course, is the erosion of incomes. People are watching every day as their normal incomes are buying less and less than they used to buy before. And that means that you're talking about reduced incomes. We are likely to see increases in poverty. We are likely to see increases in starvation or inadequate food for people. And of course, if it's not checked, then if we follow that trend, then you're likely to see also impacts on health if the situation is not checked enough. And of course, if we still don't check it enough and we continue like this, citizens will be angry. We'll be staring at civil unrest, especially in the context of political happenings in some countries.
So there are so many challenges which can come with this rise of prices, going from malnutrition, which impact the health of people, and of course, food security is somehow related to security in general.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you have something to add to that? Because there are so many challenges for sure happening. When you walk around, people are talking about it.
That's true. Actually, the soaring of food prices and fuel is really impacting on food security and nutrition. Coming from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, the last actually report, which we call the Global Report on Food Crisis, is already indicating that globally we're talking about 192 million of people that are really food insecure. Why are they food insecure? Even before really the war in Ukraine, this number was also there. So of course we are really working at the statistics, and surely it will increase. And this is because again about climate change, the impact of climate change. We see really prolonged drought, intense floods. In Kenya where we are, actually we just concluded, or we just controlled the invasion of the desert locust.
Yeah.
That really impacted again, on the communities, particularly in northern East Kenya, and this again really impacting on food and nutrition security of the communities. So to say that really what we are experiencing now with the soaring of food prices, it will really even deepen and impact even more on food security and nutrition.
Ambassador, you have alluded to something. We were talking about the current phenomenon of the rising prices. You talked about climate change and others, but to touch that phenomenon in very simple terms, how can you explain the rise of those prices today? Because in the last few months, we have seen indeed the prices skyrocketing. What is it that we can say these are the causes or the possible causes? Because if it is climate change, then it would come, I think, I guess it would be slowly increasing, but we have seen it sharply increasing. So tell me, how can you explain the current rise of the price of those commodities, especially food and fuel?
Three main. Sorry.
Yeah, Elder.
Yeah, no, thank you again, ED. Actually, the soaring of the prices and what we see now is really a combination of factors, but really mainly the war in Ukraine that has really contributed to the disruption of the food supplies. Unfortunately, that's the reality. The world is global. We live in a globalized world. We are so interconnected. So what happened, really, even if we think that is really far away from us, it really impacts us, impact on us. So to say that, of course, the disruption of food supply, it means that, of course, the food that we're really importing, because we have to take into consideration that both Ukraine and Russia are really very important suppliers of grains, of oil, of fertilizers that we in this continent are importing. So, of course, with this disruption of food suppliers, with the restrictions of grains, of really cereals and oil, which means that is there are restrictions, they are limited, of course, possibilities of buying it, and then the food, of course, the prices increases.
Yes.
So this is what we are saying. I would really say, but mainly is really the disruption of food supplies, and we saw it also with COVID-19 when countries really started to restrict their, of course, exports to countries that were importing, and we are really importing in the continent around even 30%, and there are countries that are importing even more. Wheat, cereals, fertilizers. So of course, if there is this disruption in the market, of course the price increases, and of course the impact is what we see.
Joy, you wanted to say something, and yeah, I want to listen from you.
Yes, I was just trying to say that the main causes, of course, she's already gone into depth, but just in brief, the main causes would actually be those three. First, there is the climate change, the failed crops. We just had a bad disruption by drought, meaning that we had a crop season that failed, especially in Kenya, meaning that the food supply was low. That's one thing. The other thing is we're talking about the disruption by the COVID-19, the supply disruptions in terms of raw materials, and also now we are talking about imported inflation because of the high fuel prices. There's nothing we can do about the fuel prices here. It's like we are helpless. So we just get it at the price at which it is at, which is really going up sharply. Meaning that now the price, the cost of production is going high. And this is happening within such short spans, and also not the war in Russia, which just happened. And even before, when it was clear that Russia was going into war, the prices of oil even started reacting immediately, even before the war happened. And then now there's fertilizers and all that. The cost of fertilizer has really gone up in Kenya. 6,000 per bag is pretty high for a subsistence farmer, for a small-scale farmer. So all the combination of all those is a sharp increases in food prices, which is really, I want to call it a crisis, even though it's not been declared.
It is indeed. And you talked about all this happening, and I would say the skyrocketing of the prices is a compounded effect of things which were already bad and which have worsened with the Ukraine-Russia war. But I want to come back to almost what you said to make it very clear. What can you say are the specific impact that this rise of price are having on the ordinary citizen of this continent?
Hunger.
Hunger. Exacerbating hunger, because she
Hunger,
said
yes.
there was already hunger.
Yes.
Please continue.
I was looking at the food price, just a normal basket of food from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. The statistics there, the normal food like the skuma wiki, the tomato, the cooking oil, and all that. Between 2021 and this time round, it's gone up by almost like 20%. On average, it was about 18%. But for some, yes, on average, the common basket for the normal mwananchi, we're not talking about meat here, we're not talking about luxurious things in quotes like eggs, just the normal things that you go to the market and buy, the skuma wiki, the flour, you're talking about the bread, you're talking about the potatoes and all that. The common thing, it has gone up by almost, some of them is more than 20, but when you looked at the average, it was about 18% within such a short time. That is quite an increase. Hunger
is increasing. And malnutrition for sure.
Hunger,
for
malnutrition, and of course deepened poverty. You know, we really have serious problems of access to food and particularly affordability, because of course the communities will not have those resources, the income, you know, to be able, of course, really to access and to buy food. And of course, we see the combination of factors. COVID-19 had already left so many people, you know, out of their jobs. So which means that, of course, they are really in a situation of vulnerability. So with the increase of really the food prices and the fuel, this will really deepen even more. So we will really see here a situation of really changing of maybe dietary. People will really, of course, have to drop maybe one of their meals.
Some of what, a meal.
Because they will not afford, for instance, to have 3 meals a day. They will not be able to have, of course, nutritious food, which is somehow diversify. Maybe it will mean more resources in order to buy. So actually, at the end of the day, we'll see, you know, food insecurity deepening, in malnutrition, which is already acute. We are talking, for instance, in the world about 92, of course, thousand of kids under the age of 5 that are really malnourished. But there is another phenomenon that we really already see, particularly in the urban settings, which is obesity. People are not really eating healthy food because, of course, they don't have access, because it's expensive. It's going to be even more expensive. So you will go for fast food, non-nutritious food. So which means that you have, of course, to see obesity also increasing, which has a big impact, of course, on health conditions.
On the health conditions. We have seen that the rising of the price have brought many challenges and came to worsen actually a situation which was already bad. And on the list of causes, we have a number of abiotic factors like climate, like climate mainly, but then we have also some biotic factors which come in. When you have drought, most of the times the pests which attack your crops are stronger and the devastation is bigger, and the reduction of the yield is higher. So it is a combination. But then came COVID, which compounded all those difficulties. And after COVID, we now immediately have the war in Russia and Ukraine, which comes to worsen the situation. And I want to suggest that we have a break, and after the break, we will go to details of that interconnection of the world on this bad situation, how that war, which comes very far there, can have a so bad impact on a villager somewhere in Kenya, in Mozambique, or in Rwanda. Welcome to the KIKAO session. We talked about the cause roots of the rise of the price of food and other commodities like fuel. We talked about some of the impact those rises of the prices have on the ordinary person in our continent. Also, the impact of the war happening very far from here, but having very clear impact, tangible ones. You can see it, you can feel it on the continent. Now, my question is, the pandemic came and had very drastic consequences, impact on the food supply in Africa. The war in Russia-Ukraine comes, and again, consequences on Africa. Tell me, what can we learn from these phenomenon which sometimes happen miles away, but which have impact on our populations, especially on food systems?
You know, for the past 10 years, there's something we've been pursuing in the world: globalization, interconnectedness, trade, and all that. That means that there's this interconnectedness, which is good, but also there are the risks. Those are the ones that we are seeing now. When we so much focus on the competitive advantage in terms of what is it that we can produce at a lower cost than our trading partners or than our partners, then we find that for us it's only the agricultural production mainly, which of course fetches low in the world markets. But then you're going to be importing the fertilizers, you're going to import even some food, because you cannot produce enough of all that we need, and we're relying on the markets. And that means that now, when there's a shock in a faraway continent, because of this being interconnected, it affects people. What have we learned from that? I think one of the lessons you can take away is that there's space for all this interconnectedness. There's also space for diversification. In terms of, you're going to diversify
at local level.
At the local level, not because you have a competitive advantage, but as a strategy to cushion ourselves against external shocks. Meaning that as governments, you're going to try as much as we can to ensure that we still have the capacities, the abilities to be able to produce at least more than 3/4 of our food needs domestically, if we can. And that is possible, especially in Africa, if we can strengthen and focus on our agricultural systems and focus on the people in terms of improving their ability to produce and to store, and also incentives to make that possible. I think is the best strategy that we can do.
Ambassador, yes.
Yes, no, I completely really agree with Joy, and I wanted to really add that we have to transform our agri-food systems to be really more efficient, more inclusive, and when I talk inclusivity, it's really let's listen also to the farmers. Their voices is so important to be resilient and really to be sustainable, because we see that unfortunately the way we produce, the way we, let's say, we transform, we process, and even the way we consume is no longer sustainable. So we have to build that resilience. Really building resilience is so important, so that really the farmers, they can really resist to shocks. There are so many, of course, projects and programs that we as FAO, of course, working very closely with the government of Kenya, talking about Kenya, and also with the county governments, because of course when we talk about agriculture, agriculture is devolved, that we are implementing, like the climate smart agriculture. I just came from Nyamira last week, and I had this contact with really farmers that are really coming together, producing the African indigenous vegetables that are so nutritious and that are really, of course, expanding, reaching markets. So those are the things that really we have to raise awareness. We have to promote also our local, of course, traditional food that is so nutritious and they're also important. And of course, limit, of course, that dependence on maybe other grains that are also, of course, staple food of this country are so important. But really, the diversification, I do agree with the doctors.
So we need to do something about it, not too much dependence, reduce the dependence to the global market, to the importation system, and to that comparative advantage that a continent may have on this. And reduce that reliance, and we say, okay, it will come from Ukraine, it will come from America, it will come, and try to produce what we need. I will come to another thing which probably connects with what Ambassador Mkavi have said. Connect the dot in our food system. I believe that on the African continent, in many countries currently, there are some regions where they produce those traditional vegetable, but also some other crops which are not necessarily wheat and rice or maize probably, although maize is quite common in our continent. And they don't have a way of supplying the urban areas where we have more mouths to feed. So what do you say about also opening the market and facilitating that supply chain that you talked about, which was disrupted at continental level or international level, but which could be somehow strengthened at national level so that we connect ourselves and we caution, as you say, the disruption of the importation from outside. What do you say about this?
Yes, it is true. In Kenya, every single day, somebody is starving, somebody is in abundance. And there is how that food can reach the markets and reach those that need it at affordable prices is been a challenge. Sometimes impassable roads. And sometimes, again, in Kenya, one of the biggest problems we have is the middleman. The middleman has got all the incentives to ensure that there is lower food amounts reaching the urban cities, because then he makes a profit. So he is likely to buy from farmers at a lower cost because he wants to limit the supplies in the cities. You get that mathematics of middleman. The farmers have a lot, isn't it? But because you have an incentive to make a profit, a kill, you want to buy less from the farmers, meaning that your demand from the farmers is low and the supply is high. So there you make a kill because you buy it at a very low cost. Then you bring into the cities, sell it very expensive. So you find that in the rural areas, much as this abundance, the same thing, like for example, a tomato in Nairobi now is going between 10 shillings and 15 shillings, one piece. If you go to where they're coming from in Kinagop, you'll be buying 4 for 20 shillings. What happens in between there? So governments have to be very decisive on how to make farmers access markets directly. Put them in cooperatives, put them in whichever way you organize them, but farmers have to reach the consumers directly without going through somebody who has got their own.
They need to get a fair return of their investment.
Exactly.
At that level.
And that's a policy issue, and it has to be a very decisive.
That is a policy issue.
Yes.
Yeah. I think I will connect that to what she said sometime, that we need to start producing some of these crops and these commodities that we import from outside, so that if it is disrupted, at least we have 2/3 she talked about. Tell me, does that change all the policies and strategies in the agricultural sector?
The reality is that really as the continent and in the region, we have to invest in agriculture. I should say that really Africa is so blessed with the land, with water, with sun. So therefore, what we really need is to invest in production and productivity. We need to increase production and productivity. And what does it mean? What does it require? It requires really investing. We have the Maputo Declaration, where heads of states of this continent again they really agree really to allocate 10% of their GDP into agriculture. But you know, when you look around, very few countries have reached that target. So if we are not investing, we cannot really harness that potential that we have. That giant, because the others, they say that it's the giant that is sleeping in Africa, and we are not really investing in order to harness, to feed our people, and of course even to feed the world. Africa has that potential. So again, I really go back to the Food System Summit in Kenya. There were really very engaging and consultative national dialogues that came up with a very strong pathways, you know, that is really showing that let's build the resilience of the farmers so that they can resist to shocks with programs such as the Climate Smart Agriculture and others. Let's really invest in digitalization. Here we have to bring research. Dr. Joy is here, is really coming from the university. Research is really very important.
Very important.
Improve the seeds that can really, of course, resist again to the shocks and climate change. Talk about technology, talk about science, talk about data so that we can really focus also really our approaches. And of course, the opportunities again of agriculture. Invest on women that are really the backbone of agriculture. There are so many reports. Actually, FAO is a knowledge-based organization. And we have realized that, you know, if you really invest, if the women were given really the same amount of inputs, resources, and opportunities, such as men, the production of productivity would even increase on something like 20%, which is really high. And then, of course, the opportunities that you really find in agriculture, also for young people. When you really bring the science, the technologies, innovation, which is so critical, you know, from production to consumption. We talk about really processing, transportations. So there is so much that we can really harness if we really invest in agriculture. We can no longer continue depending on the rain fed. We really have to look at, you know, the irrigation schemes. So those are the things that we have really to do, and they are doable. And I should say that if we do it, we'll see that transformation that we're really aiming at.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I think here we have gotten like a whole strategy to transform agriculture. What Ambassador is saying is exactly what was aimed by our top leaders when they say we need to transform agriculture. And that is in the declaration she talked about, Maputo, but also repeated in a certain way in Malabo. And here, one of the key challenges that we have is to implement the policies, to implement the strategies the way they are developed, to walk the talk and implement the commitment our leaders have taken at continental level. Even at country level, it happens. If we did, and then take into account all those productivity factors, like women, like the youth, provide input, smoothen the market supply, the market access, and the supply chain. Consider the whole food system rather than isolated actions. I think the situation would be totally different. Let's take a break, and when we come, we will dwell in what exactly we need to do. What are those changes? What are those actions that we need to take so that we can reduce the impact those global phenomena can have on our citizens on the African continent, and wake up that giant. Wake up that giant so that we can feed ourselves and feed the world. Welcome back to the KIKAO session. We talked about a number of things, very important things, and the connection between the global crisis and the current situation of food insecurity and poverty in Africa. We talked about other phenomena like climate change, like pests and etc. And even technologies and other factors like knowledge which could change the agricultural practices and increase productivity. And all those are things that we need to inject into our agricultural system so that we can reduce all those impacts. But from the lessons we learned from the current situation to what we desire, food security, nutrition security, poverty reduction with job creation, etc., what are the key actions that we would take, key action that we would really implement to caution the continent, African continent, against all these impacts of global and local crises which happen across the world?
Thank you. Actually, this conversation reminds me of a big study I was privileged to be part of. This big study was conceived in the perfect way, that we bring all these things we are putting together and improve the production of maize and legumes in Eastern and Southern Africa. And this study was conceived in a way that we brought in together our own scientists, breeders. They tried in all these countries we worked in different climatic zones. And they brought in legume seeds and maize seeds for farmers depending on their climatic areas. And they also had that they thought about sustainability of access to these inputs, and they partnered with the private sector, the suppliers of seeds. So they were part of that, ensuring that what they do, farmers will be able to access the same in the future. And they partnered with agricultural extension officers to ensure that the farmers in the study areas had the right information and had the right guidance in terms of agronomy, because there are also agronomists in the team. And they partnered with extension workers who worked from farm to farm, having demo farms. I remember we visited demo farms in all these countries to ensure that everything is being done perfectly in 7 countries in Africa, from Ethiopia all the way to Zimbabwe, and also Mozambique. We work in Mozambique as well, in about all that region. It was quite an ambitious program. I came in in the final stages of the evaluation stages, and you're looking at all these processes. What happened? The farmers accessed the right seeds. They accessed the right
stewardship.
Yes. What happened? Productivity increased. At that particular time, maize production, legumes, cowpeas increased all across the region. It was a success story in terms of increasing productivity. But now what happened? In Tanzania, in that particular time, there was a policy by the president that there is no more exports of maize to Kenya, because you know there was that policy that is no exports. At that particular time, the price of maize went down to 20 Kenya shillings. Farmers, that is way below the production cost. Even if you look at all these efforts were done. In other places, again, when you went to Tanzania that particular time, Tanzania and some parts of Kenya, they were like, what do we do with this harvest? Where do we take it? So it all boiled down to markets. What do farmers do with this? We are aware of the dengue revolution just the other day in Kitui in Kenya, whereby farmers, they were told there's going to be markets also in the country, and they trusted that message that they're going to be selling a kilo of dengue at about 100 shillings because of some external arrangements that their leaders were making. Those did not fall through. What happened? So incentivize farmers.
Yes.
Show the farmers where the money is, and these things will sort themselves out.
So link absolutely the production to the market, so that money can be in the pocket of the farmer.
Exactly.
It will motivate them to produce more.
Incentivize. Where is the money?
Bring the technology and the knowledge, and be with them, work with them to produce. Ambassador, I will come to the after. She is talking of the market, and at the continental level, there is this opening of the continental market. Yeah, if it is implemented, it means I can have my maize from Kenya and go and sell it somewhere in Malawi, in Egypt even, or south to. How do you see that playing that role of creating the incentive to the farmers from wherever, but at the continental level before we cross the borders?
No, this is critical and is so powerful. And really the free trade market, it's a big opportunity that again as a continent we should really take advantage of it. And I like and I agree with the Toto that real access to the market, giving the opportunity for farmers to really access the market so that they can really increase their income and of course, meet their needs is really very important. As a FAO, actually, most of the programs that we implement in Kenya we have this component that we have really to link the farmers to the market. We are losing, of course, almost 12% globally of the food that we produce, food waste and really food loss. And we see the investment, the effort and the resources that we are really putting to produce the food that at the end of the day we lose it because of lack of really access to the market. So we have to invest on that, and I couldn't agree more with you, Edie, that really the free trade agreement that we have signed is an opportunity that we really have to take advantage of it, see how we interconnect, how we exchange, what are really the needs, and of course provide the incentives to the farmers. And I go back again really to the Food System Summit and really the pathways, because they are very strong, and again we have to walk the talk. The decisions that we take, we have to make sure that we really implement them. Of course, when we look at the challenges that we face, the reports, the estimation now are really showing that in Kenya we will have around, actually we already have 4.1 million of people that are really food insecure because of the impact of climate change, droughts. Of course, we are talking about pests. It was just last month that there was an eruption of the African armyworm that is again, of course, destroying crops. So all those things, we have to address them. And that's why I'm again really bringing the resilience building that is really so important, and that again was really captured in the national dialogues also that took place in Kenya when we were discussing the Food System Summit. So I would say that really let's walk the talk.
We need to walk the talk.
The opportunities are there.
Yes.
And if there is a will, there is a way.
There is a way. That's fantastic. I come back to what you have very well said here. There are so many stressors. Climate change is one. The pests, for maize, for example, fall armyworm. We have many other pests and diseases which have occurred actually or exacerbated by climate change. But we have also global crises happening in, like the pandemic, which almost stopped all the activities, and we have the war at global level, which have impact at thousands of miles away, in addition to our own crisis on the African continent. But we have also disconnection in the food system on African continent, where we have producers who are disconnected from the consumers, and we have in the middle there pockets of people who sometimes are like taking the advantage of the disconnection and having the benefit for themselves. With all the circumstances and the technology coming in, the knowledge, the youth coming in with digital agriculture now, and new technologies, including biotechnologies, coming in to prevent those very deep fall of the agricultural production. With all that, very quickly and in clear term, where do you see agriculture, food security, food production, and the economic development of our population through improved agriculture? Where do you see our continent in terms of resilience, in terms of economic development in the next 10, 20 years?
The truth is a lot of promise in terms of there's a lot of potential in agriculture. But let us be realistic on what we are dealing with now so that we can look at how we want it to be and how we can do it. We are looking at a situation whereby agriculture, most of the food system in Africa is produced through the subsistence way, whereby farmers, just small-scale farmers with who are poor farmers producing for the majority of the people. They're using technology which is outdated. It's not because they don't want to adopt technology. It's not because they don't receive those messages on their phones about what is selling where. But the truth is, they are incapacitated because of their income levels. And that is where we have to start. Farmers' diversifications in terms of livelihood and building resilience in that. Because unless a farmer has got something to spare, it's only when they can wait until the prices are better for them to sell so that they can improve their income through agriculture. But if we can find ways of improving these livelihoods, and also again, it's until the farmers got something to share that they can adopt it to even a better farming technology, not just the donkeys doing the farming and pulling the plows and things like that. Until they have got some money to spare, can they really invest in technology and invest in all this? Improving livelihoods and building resilience in livelihoods, improving income levels at the basic. That can really help in terms of improving agriculture. Yeah. Yes.
And that can bring us to a better situation than what we are talking
yes.
about. Do you have some ideas, Ambassador?
I would say that what we are really seeing with the soaring of food prices and fuel and really impacting on our population, in our communities, particularly on farmers, that really they become more and more vulnerable, is a wake-up call. A wake-up call to really invest, to provide those necessary really incentives, whenever necessary, even to caution with really social protection policies, safety nets, so that really the farmers, they can really cope with those with this situation. I'm really very optimistic, and we should really be very optimistic. When I talk about, of course, wake-up call, actually, you know, to walk that talk, to implement. We really have really all the policies. When I talk about Kenya, really the policies are there. Of course, there is where more are really needed. We need, of course, to upscale what we are already doing. There are so many initiatives, so many projects that we see that are really contributing to that really increase income, and they have been really so impactful in rural areas and so on. Let's really upscale them. Upscaling is really very important. Let's really expand them so that until more and more people can really benefit. Let's really pass this knowledge to the communities, to the really rural farmers. Training is so crucial so that they can really adopt those best practices in order really to be sustainable in production, sustainable in what they do, resistant to the climate change. So I would say that really the optimism is there. We should not really lose that. What we should do is really continue working together, harness, of course, we didn't talk much about the private sector here, but I should really bring also private sector, open, really create those enabling environments where really partnership can really play a very important role to take us to the next level.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you, Joe. Here, let me take again some of the key messages which came from your submissions. First of all, the prices of food and other commodities like fuel are very much increasing. And that has brought more challenges to our population. And those challenges include food insecurity. We have more people who are now hungry on our continent because of the situation. But why? It is first that we had some other issues in our agricultural production, but which were compounded by two global crises, like the COVID-19 pandemic and the Ukraine-Russia war. And it came through the disruption of the supply chain. And this now calls for a number of actions that we need to take as Africans. First, we need to transform our agriculture so that we can produce more of what we need to consume. You talked about 2/3. So change in the technology, change in the incentive we give to the farmers, upscale the good practices, put incentives or inputs, make them available for the producers so that we can have more. Improve our our chain supply so that the producers can reach the consumers without the current hassles that we have. I think that will now bring a bit of solution to that, a bit of reliance to our own farmers and our agricultural sector. There are many actions and transformation. It needs many hands and many brains to come into that. And here we talked about gender, with more women empowered to do the work, but the youth coming in and contributing to this effort, but also the private sector bringing in resources so that they can play a key role at a certain level of this value chain. I think it is a call that COVID-19 and the war have made to the Africans that we have the potential to feed ourselves, but we have not walked the talk from the policies to the action that needed to be taken. And for our leadership, it is a call that we have a role to play as decision makers to give all those inputs that are needed to transform the potential into tangible gains, into return. I cannot have time to thank you, ladies, Ambassador and Professor. I think it was a very important and useful conversation here, which needs to be continued.
Right.
It has a platform so that we all understand our role and commit to play it fully, so that we take Africans to a higher level in terms of sufficiency in the food they take, and also in nutrition of their families, their children, who constitute the future of our continent. I thank you very much. Viewers, thank you very much for following our conversation. And I invite you to the next KIKAO session. Thank you very much, and goodbye for now.
Now you know, the Russia-Ukraine war, COVID-19 pandemic, or any of the global shocks, they actually matter to you. And that's the understanding we seek to give on KIKAO every week. Thank you for watching the show. Until next time, my name is Joe Ageo.